I want to talk today for just a few minutes. I'm going to be brief. We're going to talk about First Baptist Church. And so you should have a handout there in the bundle of stuff on some notable events in the history of the First Baptist Church of Paducah. In next year's journal, now you have to be a member to receive the journal. So if you're not a member, you be sure to sign up. See us afterwards to find out some information about that. But in next year's journal, this will be in an article. It'll be documented and expanded. So this is just a few things. But I thought about some important events. So we've got 7 different pastors here that are very significant. And we want to just kind of go through this briefly and look at this. If you got any questions, I'll let you try to answer when we get done. So First Baptist Church goes back to 1840 and was actually started as a branch, or sometimes they call it an arm of sometimes the mother church was known as New Bethel or Gum Spring Baptist Church, and that church actually dissolved. So the mother church of First Baptist Church doesn't exist anymore. The last record of it in the minutes of West Union is from the 1870s, I think 1876. Not sure really what happened to it, but that was the mother church. J.P. Edwards, he's buried in Lovelessville, there in the southern part of McCracken County, was the first pastor. He gathered a lot of churches, and he gathered here the First Baptist Church of Paducah. Now I thought about, there's been 25 or more pastors of this church, but I picked out 7 men that are very significant, and some significant events happened during these men. I didn't deal with any of the men in the last 50 years, just because a lot of people already know about those men. But kind of going back, some significant men. So T.L. Garrett, very significant pastor, was here in 1843 to 1844. He'd been up in Henderson County, was actually as a kind of a church planter, home missionary in Little Bethel Association, and was invited by the pastor before him to come to Paducah. And he came, the man there, A.W. Meckham, had written Garrett saying, "I need your help." And I thought this was very interesting. 1842, I seen this letter. It was published in a book. Meckham wrote Garrett saying that the Baptists in Paducah were, quote, much opposed by our Methodist brethren, and he was trying hard to, quote, contend earnestly for the faith once delivered to the saints. I thought that was very interesting. There was a little bit of conflict there, and over, of course, baptism especially. So Garrett came and became the pastor. Now, this affected where we're at today with the associations. So Garrett comes in, and this is in the Spencer's history. You may have heard this before. He learns that the church was practicing open communion, which there were no churches practicing open communion. When the convention was formed in 1845, R.B.C. Howell was the second president, pastor of First Baptist Nashville. He said there were 0 churches in the entire Southern Baptist Convention that practiced open communion. So this was unheard of in Kentucky in the 1840s. Meckham would not have done it. I found some things he wrote. What I think was happening was, and this is just me kind of looking back, historical insight, there were some Methodists that had been immersed, some Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ, sometimes they were called Campbellites, that had been immersed. I think probably some of the deacons thought, well, these people have been immersed, we'll let them take communion. And so controversy broke out over that, and it about split the church, and it did split West Union Baptist Association. The church repented of it. The First Baptist said, we're not going to do this anymore. We won't practice open communion. They repented. They reversed the practice. J.P. Edwards tries to sweep it under the rug. So you know how pastors do. People ask you, how's the church going? It's going great, man, with God's blessing. They about tried to vote you out like the week before. That's kind of what Edwards did. He said, he wrote in the associational, the minutes, he said, man, we've got a sweet spirit. There's great unity. The church is sound in the faith. Well, Edwards was exaggerating. So a lot of times people say Garrett was at fault. Both of them were at fault in this. So Garrett probably pushed too hard, and Edwards was probably a little bit dishonest. West Union splits. The Mount Olivet Baptist Association is started out of Mount Olivet Baptist Church. They're in Lowe's in Graves County. So for about 50 years, you've got 2 associations in the Jackson Purchase. The West Union Association, which continues to grow and get bigger. The Mount Olivet Association grows and gets bigger. And in 1863, they say, let's put all this behind us. This was a long time ago. And so the West Union divides. and the Mount Olivet dissolves, and they form West Kentucky Baptist Association and Graves County Baptist Association. So those two associations come out of all of this conflict that goes back to the pastorate of T.L. Garrett. Now, one very interesting thing, a lot of times people say this issue of the baptism, accepting the baptism of other denominations, they'll say, well, that idea comes from maybe landmarkism or J.R. Graves. That's not the case. So you notice the last point there on number 1, number 2 there, to help get over this. 1846, I've seen the original minutes, 1846, the West Union Baptist Association unanimously, and that's in the minutes, unanimously passed the following resolution, that this association affectionately advised the churches to refuse membership to such applicants until they have been legally baptized by a minister of the Baptist order. The Baptists in the 1840s in West Kentucky did not accept Methodist immersion or Church of Christ immersion or Presbyterian immersion. You had to be baptized by a Baptist church to be received. So I thought that was very interesting. 1846, throughout the years, the association has reaffirmed that several times past that. So that was the pastorate of T.L. Garrett. Again, he probably pushed too hard. It was mainly personal conflict between him and Edward. So very interesting there. The next man is S.H. Ford. Now, Ford's name, if you look at the pastors, Brother Brian, he's not in there. You need to list it. So in the minutes of 1851, I've got these minutes, 1851 West Union Baptist Association, he's listed as the pastor. It says Elder S.H. Ford, messenger from First Baptist Paducah to the West Union Baptist Association. Ford came from Cape Girardeau. He was British, native of England, and came here to America and was pastor there. He was pastor somewhere from the fall of 50 to about the summer of 52. Came here at that time. There was a women's college. It's basically a women's high school. A lot of times in the 19th century, you'll see a seminary that was basically a high school. So there was Paducah Women's Seminary. It was just basically Paducah's women's high school. And Ford preached and was pastor here, as well as being president of the women's college. Very interesting. Now, Ford wrote a book that's never been out of print called The Origin of the Baptist. Don's got an original copy there, Brother Don Houston, where that book comes from. So in 1852, Ford preached a message, a sermon at the West Union Baptist Association. Associations gather, you have business, you have singing, you have sermons. He preached a sermon called The Past and the Future of Baptist Churches. The pastors there loved it. They voted, said, we're going to print this in the minutes. So if you get the 1852 minutes of West Union Baptist Association, this is very rare. You not only got the reports and the associational table, you got a sermon there by S.H. Ford. And Ford took that sermon and he expanded it into a book, The Origin of the Baptist. And it's still in print. You can buy that at baptistbooks.com. You can buy inexpensive reprint. So very interesting. That book, a lot of people know about that book, but don't realize it came out of West Kentucky in Paducah, West Union Baptist Association, 1852. Ford's wife passed away. Not sure if it was disease, what happened. She's buried in an unmarked grave here in Paducah somewhere. She doesn't have a marker. We're not sure. So after that, Ford just needed a change, and he moved to Louisville. All right, another man, J.M. Moody, 1880 to 1882. What's significant about J.M. Moody? Probably the greatest theologian Southern Baptists have ever produced that you've never heard of. I mean, he wrote 40-something books on Baptist theology. Several of them have never been out of print. Nobody knows this guy. Even A.W. Pink. Now, you know Baptist theology, you know A.W. Pink. Pink even said, Pink in his book, The Sovereignty of God, in the beginning of it, Pink lists about 10 men who influenced him. And they're all big names: Luther, Calvin, Edwards, J.B. Moody. So that sort of tells you something right there about J.B. Moody. He was that good of a theologian. He was pastor here for just a few years, Very interesting. He was a debater. Debates were very common. So he's pastoring here. He's going off. He held a debate with Hardin that was very influential. Preached a 3-week revival in Mayfield that was very successful. And he stayed here just a couple of years, and he ended up leaving to become editor of the Baptist Gleaner newspaper in Fulton. Now, here's what's interesting about Moody. So, if you go down to UT Martin, University of Tennessee at Martin in Martin, Tennessee, and you go into the administrative building, J.B. Moody, this Baptist preacher who was pastor of this church, his picture is on the wall at the University of Tennessee Martin. How in the world did that happen? So in 1900, the Baptists of West Kentucky and West Tennessee said, we've got to have a preacher school here in West Kentucky and West Tennessee. And they started it in Martin, kind of to reach both Tennessee and Kentucky, and they named it the Hall Moody Institute. Sometimes they call it the Hall Moody Bible Institute. Now, if you've ever heard of Freed Hardman down in Tennessee, the Church of Christ School, they stole that idea from the Baptists. They named that after 2 Church of Christ preachers, but the Baptists did it first. They started Hall Moody, 1900, in Martin, Tennessee, named after J.N. Hall. Hall was pastor at Arlington, was pastor at Fulton, pastor at a lot of different churches, Wycliffe, and they named it after Moody. And so that school was eventually took over, and the property was took over during the Depression by the University of Tennessee Martin. So Moody's picture is still on the wall. Moody's books are great. J.N. Hall said Moody's books were better than a course in the seminary. So great, there's great books. Don's got some more of them. Don, you can hold up that one. So if you want to know about, and he's got some original copies. They're still in print today. My Church, great book on ecclesiology and the distinguishing doctrines of the Baptists. Kind of covers Baptist distinctives too. Wonderful books. You can buy very inexpensive. So just a tremendous theologian that was pastor here in 1880 to 1882. All right, turn over to the back. All right, John S. Cheek or J.S. Cheek. Now, if you register as a messenger to the convention, you'll receive, and even if you don't, go over to the registration table and just ask for a copy of the Western Recorder booklet. And I've got a big long article in there on J.S. Cheek. On the Great Revival of 1905, 1906. So if you're going to, when you register as a messenger, they'll give you that book. If you're not going to register, just say, can I have a copy of the Western Recorder booklet? It's a magazine, and they'll give you one. I've got a lot more information. So Cheek, he came to Paducah from First Baptist Russellville. I was actually born in Russellville, so that's my home county. He came from Logan County here, and he arrives in the spring. That fall, he decides to have a revival, and he gets an evangelist by the name of Cates, George C. Cates. Now, Cates had preached a lot of great revivals. He preached a revival in Murray. A lot of folks had been saved. He preached a revival at First Baptist Mayfield, and they said, I think around 50 people had been saved. So he preached a lot of great revivals, and so Cheek says, well, let's have this man. He's preached at Murray. He's preached in Mayfield. Let's have George C. Cheek come and preach a revival at First Baptist Paducah. Now back then the church is downtown, down on the riverfront, and so Cheek comes. They have their first service on November 19th, 1905. Very common back then for revivals to kind of go 2 weeks. You may remember the old timers talking about 2-week revivals. And so he came, was probably going to stay 2, maybe 3 weeks. That was kind of what they would do. If the revival went well, maybe stay an extra week, 2 or 3 weeks. So Cheek comes in November 19th, 1905, and the revival lasts every day. And by I mean every day, Thanksgiving, they had services. New Year's Eve, they had services. New Year's Day, they had services. Christmas Day, and I've got this in the article of the Western Recorder. I think the service went to like on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, one of those two. It went to like 2 o'clock at night. So they had services for 121 days straight. Now you think about that. A revival lasts that long. But it's even more than that. So what they would do back then, now a lot of people, even in the city, people had milk cows. So you milk in the morning, you milk in the afternoon. So they would typically have, even the country churches or the city churches, when they'd have revivals, they'd have 2 services. So you'd have noontime services, People would go and milk, do their morning chores, get cleaned up, and a lot of people could come for the noon service, and then they have a service at night. And so they start the revival there on November 19th, 2 services a day. It's so well attended. After a little while, they said, we've got to add a 3rd service. And then, so on Sundays, what they would do is they would have, I think the weekends they did the 3rd and 4th services. So they had 2 services a day during the week. On Sundays, it got to where they were having 4 services. So 2 services a day during the weekdays, 4 services on Sunday. How's he doing it? They brought a Baptist preacher from Southern Illinois in to help Cates, and then Chief was preaching. So they're kind of taking turns, and they said a lot of times they'd have overflow. The Sunday night service would almost all be men. Men would finish up working at the factories on the riverfront there. They'd come over, the balcony would be full of men just off work. And a lot of times there'd be a room where if they couldn't squeeze any more in. There's no fire restrictions back then, so you imagine they squeezed them in. And then if they couldn't squeeze any more, they said they put the rest of them in a room over here, and another preacher preached to them. So this goes on and on and on. About 1,500 people are converted. 1,500 people are saved. Around 1,000 of them joined this church. So back then, Baptists didn't separate baptism and church membership. So everybody that got baptized here at First Baptist would have been joining the church. I'm sure some maybe would have joined what was then known as Second Baptist, came Emmanuel. Probably some joined other denominations as well. So about 1,500 people converted. 1,000 of them joined First Baptist. I think probably, and I can't think of anything else, probably the greatest local church revival in ever Kentucky Baptist history. Now you've got the Great Awakening. That's not really, one church doing it. So, the Second Great Awakening things in Kentucky. But probably the greatest church revival in Kentucky Baptist history. Chief worked himself to death, and he actually died as a result of this. So you think about this, if you're a pastor, he's going to every day, going to the noon services, he's going to the night services, on Sunday 4 services, he's preaching some of these. He's still got to do funerals, he's still got to do weddings, he's still got to do counseling, he's got to do all the baptizing, and he was, I think, in his 40s at this time, and he ends up having a nervous breakdown. They send him to Arkansas to the hot springs. That was kind of to recover, and he gets better. He comes back. Within a week, his nerves are shot again. And he goes to Texas to live with family and ends up dying. And so that's why the revival kind of dies what kind of stops when it does. There in March 18th, you notice he dies just 3 days after that. So worked himself to death. What just an amazing event. So we'll have some more in this. There's several people I've talked to that are members of this church that have done a tremendous amount of research on this as well. So it is a great story that every now and then you'll hear little tidbits of it, but nobody's really did much with it and really needs to be brought out. So just a tremendous story, J.S. Chief. I mentioned these last 3 briefly. M.E. Dodd came to Paducah from First Baptist Fulton, and so Dodd is a tremendous preacher. Dodd also is an organizer. Dodd is probably the one who got Sunday school really going at First Baptist Church. He brought Louis Enzimer to the church. Enzimer was Mr. Sunday School in the first kind of third of the 20th century to conduct a Sunday school growth campaign. I thought this was interesting. This was in the Paducah Sun. So Baptists back then had standards. And so Dodd, it made the front page that said Dodd was attacked by the husband of a woman he refused to allow to sing in the church choir due to her publicly living in sin. That made the paper here in Paducah. So if you're going to sing in the choir, you got to be living right. So I thought that was pretty good. Dodd goes on to be president of the convention 33 and 34. Sometimes Dodd is given credit for the cooperative program. Dodd actually learned that from H. Boyce Taylor. He and Taylor were good friends. Taylor said that, I love this, he had this quote, he said, Dodd was so straight on Baptist doctrine, he leaned backwards. So I thought that was good. You notice the quote by Dodd there at the bottom, and Dodd was recognized kind of in this time period. George Truett and M.E. Dodd are kind of the 2 great preachers among Southern Baptists. Just tremendous orators, great preachers. And I like this, Dodd said, for Baptists, Preaching the Word has ever been the highest and holiest privilege and duty. Music, writing, organization, orders of worship, orders of services, ordinances, there may be, but preaching there must be. That's a great quote, isn't it? So God was a great man, did very, very well here, and moved on to pastor other large churches as well. S.C. Toll came after God, came from Arkansas, and so Toll was very good friends with Boyce Taylor, and he preached in Taylor's Bible Conference, Bible Institute in 1912. And so the yellow book you've got, Denominationalism to the Test, is sermons that were preached by the Paducah pastor at First Baptist Murray in this large Bible conference. That was kind of the largest Bible conference Kentucky had back then, was Boyce Taylor's Bible conference. Thought it was very interesting. In 1913, Toll invited J.M. Frost. And at that time, the Southern Baptist Sunday School literature was using the international Sunday School lessons. And Toll brought Frost in and said, let's start writing our own literature. And Frost ended up agreeing. So after that, Southern Baptists, instead of using kind of non-denominational literature and publishing it, they began to write their own. And even today, Southern Baptist writers, we write our own Sunday school literature. So I thought that was very interesting. Toll had a big influence. Now here's what's fascinating about S.C. Toll. 1925, the Southern Baptist Convention adopts the Baptist faith and message. They take the New Hampshire Confession of Faith, modify it very slightly, and Southern Baptists adopt the New Hampshire Confession of Faith as the Baptist faith and message. The background of that was evolution. John Scopes, buried here in Paducah, the Scopes monkey trials in 1925. And so evolution was all the controversy. And so Southern Baptists adopt the Baptist faith and message to show their churches, their pastors, the world, we believe the Bible. In the article on the fall of man, it says we believe in creation. We believe that man was created. But there was nothing against evolution in the 1925 Baptist faith and message. It's a positive statement on creation, very short, but nothing else. And so in 1926, a lot of Southern Baptists weren't satisfied with that. So George McDaniel, pastor of First Baptist Richmond, Virginia, McDaniel offers this motion. This convention accepts Genesis as teaching that man was the special creation of God and rejects every theory, evolution or otherwise, which teaches that man originated or came by way of lower and animal ancestry. So that was called the McDaniel motion. Amen. The McDaniel statement. It passed, I think, unanimously. Nobody wanted to vote against it. But and so Toll comes up next. Man who'd been pastor here. And Toll makes the Toll resolution. And Toll says that every one of our Southern Baptist seminaries and schools and institutions affirm the McDaniel statement. And it made E.Y. Mullins furious. So what you've got is, even in the 20s, you've got some Southern Baptist leaders who are not sure about evolution. So if you remember, if you went to Mid-Continent when I did, or even earlier in the 80s, you may remember Charles Floyd. Brother Floyd, great man. He passed away several years ago. Brother Floyd grew up in the First Baptist Church of Marion. His pastor was J.C. Lilly. Brother Floyd told me this story. He said, I remember Brother Lilly telling me. And so Brother Lilly was a student at Southern Seminary in the 1920s. And Brother Lilly said, I was in class. A.T. Robertson was teaching. A.T. Robertson told us, boys, don't talk about evolution too much. It may be right. And so a lot of the Southern Baptist leaders were like, we got to be careful. We're not sure this evolution thing might be right. And so it was very, very controversial. It passed. And what happens is, within a year or two, it's forgotten. It's ignored. And doesn't really have an impact. And so what happens is you fast forward 50 years. Paige Patterson, Paul Pressler, and I know some of those names aren't as highly regarded as they used to be because of some immorality. But Adrian Rogers and those men come along and say, hey, if we pass resolutions and amendments and things, the moderates are just going to ignore them. That's not going to change the convention. We've got to elect conservative presidents to elect conservative trustees. Adrian Rogers is the first conservative elected with that mindset, 1979. That leads to the conservative resurgence. So a lot of that goes back to Toll. They realized Toll was trying to get the convention on the right track with creationism, with God creating the world and denying evolution. But again, it was just sort of ignored. So I thought that was very, very fascinating SC talk. Last man I want to talk to you about is D.B. Clapp, who was pastor here in 22 through 29. Boyce Taylor described this man as a steam engine in breeches. So he must have been some kind of preacher. When Clapp came here, the Baptist and Reflector out of Tennessee described him this way. He said, Clapp rings clear on every New Testament doctrine, laying great emphasis on Christian living and church discipline. So in the 1920s, Baptists were still practicing church discipline, and that's going to get Clapp in trouble. So Clapp brings a lot of big-name preachers. W.B. Riley was a big-name preacher in the 20s. He brings Riley to Paducah to do a 10-day revival. But in 1929, the church splits over discipline. And this made the national news. I mean, it's all through the Paducah Sun, all through the papers. He disciplined people over worldliness and the different sins related to that. And people's family got upset. And the church ended up dividing. And so there's still several members at Farmington where I pastor. Some of the older members remember an old preacher by the name of V.A. Turner. And I got to talk to Brother Turner's widow before she died about 20 years ago. And Brother Turner was one of Brother Clapp's preacher boys here at First Baptist. And so this is what Miss Turner said. Said it got so contentious. There got two groups in the church. Each side is changing the locks. So you get, again, the church is downtown. Now, then you got to church and you didn't know if you were going to get in the building on Sunday. One group had the key and they changed the lock, and the other would get the sheriff to get open and they changed the lock. They started having services. That would have been a big sanctuary then. Finally, they started having both services at the same time. So one group get on this side of the sanctuary, one group get on the front, one group get in the back, and y'all preach at the same time. And Miss Turner said, she said, Vernon, Brother V.A. Turner was full of spit and vinegar, and they said the other guy didn't have a chance when it was his turn to preach. And so very, very contentious. Eventually, a majority got a court order, and they said, Clapp has got to resign. So he takes 500 people and organizes the Baptist Tabernacle down. The building is still there. It's a different church. It's some sort of non-denomination church now. But this building, it was on 12th and Jefferson. When that building was built, Baptist Tabernacle, it was the largest sanctuary in the western end of Kentucky. I've been in when Brother Frank Queen was pastor there before it closed. He took several of his mid-continent students in. Massive. You could fit hundreds of people in the balcony alone. Massive sanctuary, and Clapp was there about 10 years before he retired. And the church is sadly closed as the neighborhood changed. But I thought this was last thing interesting. Clapp goes there, and this kind of shows you a little bit about Clapp. First thing he does is has J. Frank Norris, the Texas tornado preacher, to come in and preach a revival there at Baptist Tabernacle. You go by the building today, again, it's another church, but if you look up above the columns on the front door, still etched in stone, it still says Baptist Tabernacle there on the church. So those are 7, I think, very significant pastors, had a big influence on the church as well as the Baptist preachers in the area. All right.